Imagine this. It's a Saturday morning. You're sitting at your kitchen table scrolling through Zillow for the third time this week. You've been renting for years. Your parents keep asking when you're finally going to settle down and buy a place. Your coworker just closed on a house last month and won't stop talking about it. Your Instagram feed is full of people posting keys in front of their new front doors with captions like, "We did it." And somewhere deep inside your chest, there's this quiet, nagging voice that says, "I'm falling behind." So you start doing the math. You check your savings, you talk to a lender, you get pre-approved, and suddenly you're standing inside a $450,000 house that smells like fresh paint, imagining where your couch would go. The realtor smiles and says, "This one won't last long." Your heart starts racing. You think, maybe it's time, maybe I should just do it. And that feeling right there is exactly where the trap begins. Here's the truth. What I'm about to share with you is not what the real estate industry wants you to hear. It's not what your parents learned in the 1990s, and it's definitely not what that motivational post about building equity told you. But if you're thinking about buying a house in 2025 or 2026, you need to hear this before you sign anything. Because the math has changed, the economy has changed, and the old rules of home ownership no longer work the way most people think they do. Let's start with the belief that almost everyone grows up hearing. Renting is throwing money away. Buying a home is the smartest investment you'll ever make. You've heard it 1,000 times. Your parents said it. Financial advisors repeated it. Even strangers at dinner parties nod along when someone says it. And for decades, in a very specific economic environment, it was partially true. Housing prices rose steadily. Interest rates were low. Wages kept up with inflation. At least enough to make payments manageable. Buying a home in 1985 or even 2012 was a fundamentally different financial decision than buying one today. But here's the problem. People are using yesterday's logic to make today's biggest financial commitment. Let's look at the actual math, because this is where most people's eyes glaze over, and it's exactly why they end up trapped. Say you buy a house in 2026 for $420,000. That's close to the current national median. You put down 10%, which is $42,000. That means you're financing $378,000. Now let's say your interest rate is 6.8%, which is realistic for 2026 based on current projections. On a standard 30-year fixed mortgage, your monthly payment for principal and interest alone would be roughly $2,470. Over 30 years, that adds up to about $889,200 just in principal and interest. Remember, the house only cost $420,000. You're paying more than double that by the time you're done. But we're not done, not even close. Add property taxes. The national average is about 1.1% of the home's value per year. On a $420,000 home, that's around $4,620 a year, or $138,600 over 30 years. Then there's homeowners insurance, roughly $1,800 a year on average, which comes to $54,000 over the life of the loan. And maintenance? The general rule is to budget 1 to 2% of the home's value per year for repairs and upkeep. Let's be conservative and say 1.25%. That's $5,250 a year, or $157,500 over 30 years. Add it all up. You're looking at a total cost of approximately $1,239,300 to own a home that was listed at $420,000. Let that sink in for a second. Now here's the part almost nobody talks about. In the first 10 years of your mortgage, roughly 75 to 80% of every payment you make goes straight to interest. Not equity, not ownership, interest. That means for the first decade, you're barely chipping away at what you actually owe. You're essentially paying rent to the bank and calling it an investment. After 10 years of payments totaling nearly $296,000, you might have built only about $60,000 in equity. And here's the kicker. The average American sells their home after just 8 to 10 years, which means most people sell before they've even started meaningfully paying down their loan. They walk away thinking they made money, but once you subtract closing costs, agent fees, repairs, and all the interest they paid, many of them barely broke even. Some actually lost money. But here's where it gets worse. Let's talk about what that money could have done instead. This is called opportunity cost, and it's the silent killer of wealth that nobody puts on a real estate brochure. Let's say instead of buying, you kept renting at $1,800 a month. That's $670 less than the mortgage payment alone, not including taxes, insurance, and maintenance. If you invested that $670 difference every single month into a low-cost index fund, averaging 8% annual returns, after 30 years you'd have approximately $980,000. And remember that $42,000 down payment. If you had invested that lump sum on day one and never touched it, at 8% average returns over 30 years, it would grow to roughly $422,000 all on its own. Combined, your investment portfolio would be worth around $1.4 million. Compare that to a house that might be worth $750,000 after appreciation, but cost you over $1.2 million to own. The math isn't even close. Now you might be thinking, but at least with a house, I have something real, something I can live in, something I own. And I get that, I really do. But let's be honest about what ownership actually means when you have a mortgage. You don't own that house, the bank does. If you stop paying, they take it. If the market crashes, you're underwater. If you need to move for a job, you can't just give 30 days notice, you're locked in. Home ownership with a mortgage isn't freedom. It's a 30-year commitment to a single asset in a single location with a single bet that the market will go up. In any other context, a financial advisor would call that an incredibly risky, undiversified investment. So why do so many people still rush to buy? This is where things get really interesting because the answer isn't financial, it's psychological. Buying a home is one of the most emotionally loaded decisions a person can make. It's tied to identity, to status, to the feeling that you've made it. When you hand someone the keys to their first house, dopamine floods their brain. They feel accomplished. They feel adult. They feel safe. And every cultural message around them reinforces that feeling. Movies, TV shows, social media, even the language we use. We say homeowners like it's a title. We say renters like it's a phase you're supposed to outgrow. There's also deep social pressure at play. When your friends start buying houses, something shifts. You start feeling like you're behind, like something is wrong with you for still renting. Psychologists call this the bandwagon effect, the tendency to follow what everyone around you is doing, regardless of whether it actually makes sense for your situation. And then there's fear of missing out. Fear that prices will keep going up and you'll be priced out forever. That fear is one of the most powerful motivators in human decision making, and the real estate industry knows it. Every headline that says home prices expected to rise is designed to trigger that fear, to make you act fast, to make you stop thinking and start signing. But the real trap is this. Most people don't buy a house because they ran the numbers. They buy a house because they felt something, and by the time the emotion fades, they're 5 years into a mortgage, realizing their investment has cost them more than they expected, limited their mobility, drained their savings, and locked them into a lifestyle they didn't fully choose. So what do financially smart people actually do differently? They separate emotion from strategy. They don't ask, can I afford the monthly payment? They ask, is this the highest and best use of my capital over the next 10 to 20 years? They run the numbers on both sides, buying versus renting and investing, the difference. They factor in flexibility, career growth, market conditions, and diversification. And sometimes, yes, buying does make sense. If you're in a low-cost market, if interest rates are genuinely favourable, if you plan to stay for 15 or more years, and if you've already built a strong financial foundation, home ownership can be a reasonable part of a broader strategy. But it should never be your only strategy, and it should never be a decision made from fear or social pressure. Here's what I'd encourage you to do if you're considering buying in 2026. First, run the real numbers, not the ones the lender shows you. The full cost, including interest, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and opportunity cost. Second, ask yourself honestly why you want to buy. Is it because the math makes sense, or because you feel like you're supposed to? Third, give yourself permission to rent without guilt. Renting is not failure. Renting while investing aggressively is one of the most powerful wealth-building strategies available today. And fourth, remember that a house is a place to live. It can be a fine asset, but it is not automatically a great investment, and treating it like one without doing the math is how people end up house rich and cash poor, equity trapped with no liquidity and no options. Look, I'm not here to tell you never to buy a house. I'm here to tell you to think before you buy one. Because the biggest financial mistakes people make aren't the ones that feel risky. They're the ones that feel safe. They're the ones everyone around you is making. They're the ones wrapped in tradition and social approval, and the warm glow of a front porch and a welcome mat. The 2026 housing market is not your parents' housing market. Interest rates are different, prices are different, the economy is different, and you deserve to make this decision with clear eyes, real math, and your future self in mind, not with a racing heart, and a realtor whispering, "This one won't last long." Your wealth is not built by following the crowd. It's built by understanding what the crowd doesn't. And now you do.